Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another session of career exploration. Today, we have the pleasure of having our friend Christopher from TransPerfect to share a little bit about the gaming industry or gaming within TransPerfect. So as you all know, this is a very long series that we've been holding with our partners at TransPerfect to talk about careers of the future. But in this case, this is a career today. And we're excited for it because it's going to be focused on gaming and within the translation industry. But I don't want to give it too much away, Christopher. So I'm going to actually turn it over to you so you can share a little bit about what we're going to chat about today.
For sure. So I will switch over to a slide deck and kind of run through my presentation. It introduces myself, talks a little bit about TransPerfect and what we're trying to do here. Goes through different game industry positions that you could break into or have good careers in. Gives you towards the end a little bit of tips on things that I've learned in my 24 years in the game industry. And then if we have time, we might do a funny story or two and then open it up for QA at the end. So keep track of your questions and we will answer them. All right, let me share my screen. I don't use Zoom as often, so bear with me.
It might be because you spend a lot of time at Microsoft, isn't it?
That's true. And our team here at TransPerfect mostly uses Teams. So a Microsoft solution. Yep. All right. So again, I'm Chris Chamberlain. I am the Senior Director of Gaming. Here at TransPerfect, we kind of have different sides of the business. So we have kind of a sales team that goes out, meets clients, brings them in, brings us the work and asks us, hey, I've got a client looking for this. They need a developer for the next year and they need to have experience in this. And then we go and source those people and bring them on board and we get to work on some pretty cool game projects. So we're not actually the people publishing the games but we help out with the other services. So we'll give you kind of an intro here. Here's the agenda we'll go through today, just kind of an introduction of myself and an introduction of myself. What does TransPerfect do in gaming? Potential careers you could break into, breaking into the industry, how I got in, some other interesting stories. I spent probably over 10 years, maybe almost 15 years, breaking into the industry in QA or testing. Kind of rose up the ranks there and then moved into design quite a bit. Got to work with an awesome company in the UK called Rare. They do Donkey Kong Country and Banjo-Kazooie and Viva Pinata, Cameo, Connect Sports, a lot of those types of games. And then from there, if I have time, I'll do an industry story or two, and then we can do Q&A at the end. So who am I? I'm a father of two amazing boys. I have Ethan and Trevor. Ethan's 7.5 and Trevor's 13.5. They are featured there with the dog jumping up on our lap in front of the arcade machines. I'm engaged to my fiance, Megan. We're going to get married this year on September 30th. We have a blended family. She has 2 kids from her previous marriage and I have 2 from mine. We are awesome together. So I'm definitely a dog lover, especially sled dogs. I've had Huskies and Samoyeds my entire life. So the fluffy dog there is Eris, named after a character from Final Fantasy VII. My previous dog was named Cloud after another character in Final Fantasy. I'm definitely a car enthusiast. From when I started driving in the 90s, I've driven Japanese sports cars and since 2012, European sports cars. So in the upper right there is my current car. It's a Lotus Evora 400. We just took it to a car show this weekend, which was a lot of fun. And then the red one there is the one I have on pre-order. Those hit in the United States here in October. So I'm so looking forward to getting that new one. I'm a big movie buff, like a lot of different movies, but Aliens, John Carpenter's remake of The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Pulp Fiction, Flash Gordon, the cheesy one from the 80s with the Queen soundtrack, and the first Terminator. The second one's good, but I prefer the first one. Those are just some of my favorites. I'm a long-time console and arcade gamer and collector. I've got thousands of games in my game room, and even around my house, I have right now 5 arcade cabinets in my house. I'm not allowed to go beyond that because they take up so much room, but I've got about 180 different arcade game boards and you can swap them in and out. So it's kind of cool. And then I collect art and animation as well. Anything from old Disney stuff up to the cartoons I grew up with, like Transformers in the 80s, and even modern day game art or classic game art. So I collect it all. I'm a big heavy metal fan. You might not see it because of my head shaved now, but back in the day, I used to have long hair down to my booty, and I still love a lot of heavy metal. My fiance likes country, so whoever drives in our car gets to choose the music, and we go back and forth between those two. And then I've worked in the game industry for 24 years. That started in the late 90s at a company called Looking Glass Studios. They're no longer around, but they created a franchise called System Shock. The kind of spiritual successor to that series is BioShock. So if you played any of the BioShock games, you'll know very much what that one is about. And then from there, that company went under towards the end of 99. And then I started at Microsoft before there was an Xbox, worked on PC games there, and got to be involved in the creation of the first Xbox, not the console itself, but the first games and the launch titles. Kind of grew up in the ranks as I went. So moved on to being a test lead and working with some Japanese developers, which was fun. Sonic Team, which you probably all know. I worked on Phantasy Star Online with them. Arttoon was another developer I worked with that were ex-Sonic Team members. They had a game called Blinks the Time Sweeper with this time manipulating cat that was awesome. Then I worked with Rare for about 8 years, as I previously talked about, on some great titles. Moved more into a little bit of engineering and leading teams. Worked on Gears of War. That was a pretty fun franchise. Rise Son of Rome with Crytek in Hamburg, Germany. And then moved more into production and managing the projects from a higher level, making sure all the disciplines kind of work together and we ship things on time. And so from there, experience in a whole bunch of different disciplines: testing, designing, engineering, and production, which is not colored in for some reason. That's all right. Here's some of the games that I worked on in my career. There's some heavy hitters towards the top there: Halo, Gears of War, Banjo-Kazooie. But huge passion for games, always volunteering for the games that are going to be the most challenging or things that kind of interest me. And I've been very blessed on the titles I've gotten to work on in my career. So getting into the company, TransPerfect, you can see some of the information here. Actually, this is a slide that's a few years old. The company was founded in 1992 by two people in a dorm room. They knew they wanted to do translations, and that has just boomed over the last 32 or so years. The company has been profitable 31 of those 32 years, it's been profitable all years, but it continues to grow in revenue year after year or year over year. So, and just lots of cool data on the company here and what we kind of do. These are all the gaming areas that we're currently in. We do localization for games, a lot of testing and QA. We're setting up kind of a new business where we help with global age ratings. So a lot of developers don't have time to kind of file their games for the ESRB, or Entertainment Software Ratings Board. And then every country usually has its own set of ratings and criteria that you have to do. So it's a cool new market we're breaking into. Art, we make game art, everything from concept sketches, 2D art, 3D art, rigging characters so that they can move their joints in the game, art and animation effects for the characters, VFX, like once they're adding particle effects and things like that. So definitely exciting. Bit of UI and UX work as well. UI is user interface. So when you play a game, the title screen, the menus that you go through that need to teach you how the game's played, where is the key indicators in the game that are going to give you information on your character, things like that. Audio, we're a little bit lighter on, but we're starting to get into that area that's creating music, sound effects, voiceover, localizing that voiceover. So you don't want to have a game where it sounds like somebody's reading a script, or you translate it into another language and it's not the best translation. And some things can get lost in translation, and you want the gamers to be, on the same page, regardless of what language they're playing in. And then player support is another one. So this could be community management, where we're helping a company announce the new stuff that's coming out, when they can expect it, when fans can expect it to roll out, as well as when players hit bugs or have problems in the game, they can contact a team and work with them to understand, troubleshoot, and get them back into playing as quickly as possible, give them a good experience. So I'm going to go over the different careers you can kind of get into here. Engineering and game development is a huge one. This is kind of coding features for a game. There's client and server side developers. So the client focuses on maybe what goes into a single player experience or a story-based experience, generally not a lot of online play. You can focus on features like saving and loading and a bunch of other areas of the title. Server side is more multiplayer. If you have dedicated servers deployed for your title, or you connect in a different way, and that feature set is kind of the other side. This person understands game engines, whether you're working in Unreal or Unity or some proprietary engine that the company's created. You need to have that experience. We help with co-development. That's working with a game developer or publisher to kind of help them create their game. We're not the one who owns the vision, but they come to us and they say, hey, you know, we need help with this feature in the game, and we might come on board and take over that feature or work with a full-time employee at that company to kind of, you know, flesh it out and figure out who's going to cover what. It's very challenging for a developer to come on an in-development title and understand the coding and things like that. Good developers put in a lot of comments with their code, so you can always understand what's going on and what they're trying to do. Some developers don't do that, and that's very challenging. So porting games to different platforms, a lot of times the developer is smaller, or they just have so many things lined up that they jump from project to project. So we will help, you know, take games from PC, port them to the consoles. Sometimes people have a PC game and they want it to be on mobile. We can help with all that. So creative is one of the exciting areas that we have set up this year, and we are working with clients on their big AAA games all the way down to indie games to kind of create art for the game. But these are different areas you can kind of break into for design and art. You know, some of us will come up with concepts or help flesh out concepts for a game. We do character design, UI design. Again, that's the user interface in a game. We can start with early pre-production concepts, do marketing assets. You know, we can do a lot of different things, create maps for games, design the environments. And so I will show you some examples of things that we have actually created for games. I'm not going to call out what games they are, but I'm sure you will recognize a lot of them. So here's some concept art that our team has done and put together. These are, you know, before you start building the game or before you start talking about creating 3D models, this is a lot of the stuff that you create early on. So some pretty cool stuff here. Once you are done kind of with the 2D phase, you start working on the 3D character models. So these are 3D characters we've done for a game. These usually go into the game. They need to be tuned and optimized for performance and things like that. Do a lot of texturing and other things. And then we, you know, some of these are 3D weapons and props that we put in games. So. And then beyond that, we have some vehicles that we've done. Definitely creative. You can see a lot of these aren't real vehicles, or you gotta come up with concepts to explain to the player, you know, what timeline you're in, how things function. So. And then you can also do 3D environments, like model the environments and things that the player will kind of move through the world and see as they go along. And a lot of times you have to do complicated geometry and things like that. So game production is another area we focus on. Like I said, I spent probably the last 7-8 years doing this. It's coordinating and doing due diligence on developers. So if you're a publisher and you're going to have another developer make your game, you got to go out usually on site or kind of figure out a way to do it remotely. But you need to make sure that that developer can do what they say, that they can meet the deadlines that you have set and things like that. So it kind of helps to do some due diligence, and then we sign deals for games. That's when I was more of a first party working with like Xbox. Here we don't do as much due diligence unless it's to make sure we're hiring candidates that will be able to do the job. So planning out the high level and medium level schedules. So this is understanding the parts of the game and what order to build it in and how it makes the most sense, how you scale up your team. So you might start out with, you know, 5-10 people and scale up. Some developers are only a few people on the project, or sometimes even one person on the project. And it's just figuring out what their timeline is and how we can help them out. They generally manage all the different disciplines. So design, engineering, art, QA. We do daily stand-ups generally, where each person on the team gives a quick 1 minute or so update on what they're working on. If they have problems or are blocked on something, we make sure we remove those, or we dig up and find the information that that person needs to keep doing their job. And we don't just let somebody get stuck. Like, we give them something else to work on. Hey, you're busy on this. Okay. Can we swap your current work with somebody else who's maybe more skilled in this area and give you this area that you're good at? Or let's put this one on hold till we get all the information we have to do it. And then you can work on this thing that we know until then. You're calling out the rest of the schedule as well. Every now and then you have to delay a title. It's never good. It costs more money when you have to do that. So making sure, as a producer, you're kind of like, if you think of a ship in the ocean and you're coming up on rocky sections of the ocean as you try and get to shore, you're kind of up in the crow's nest looking out, and your job is to tell the team, hey, we're coming up on the rocks, move the ship to the left, and make sure that the milestones are hit, that you're hitting the deadlines that you need to hit, and anything that you can see in front of you that might be a problem, you're resolving those before you get there. We do sprint planning. Sprint planning is generally a process where you determine what everybody on the team is going to work on for the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. When you finish that, you do a retrospective with the team and you talk to everybody. Generally, people will write on cards what went well, what didn't go so well, and maybe some suggestions for improvement and how to do better process moving forward. We always want to be improving and streamlining process, learning from our mistakes. You can make mistakes when you do game development, but the important thing is to fail quickly, learn from those problems, and just don't keep repeating the same mistakes. Come up with better ways to do things every time. Talking to leadership and giving them regular data and status on progression. They're higher level, they're focused on the business as a whole. They generally have multiple projects, so you need to be able to show up and in an hour or less kind of talk through the different areas of the game, what's going well, maybe show a demo, things like that. And then analyzing data and making recommendations on paths to follow. I can give you kind of an example. The last game that I worked on, we released the game and we had different KPIs, or key performance areas of the game. And 5 of the 6 areas we set out, we met and exceeded, and 1 we didn't do as well in. And so I had to come up with a plan on how we were going to measure improving that, and what things would basically measure success. What was the process that we were going to do to improve this area, and what did success look like? So for some reason, my slide deck is not going on. So let me see if I can stop sharing and reshare it real quick. Sorry for the technical hiccups. And we will continue onward.
Christopher, I'm going to jump in real quick. Some of the things that, as you were talking about different career paths that you brought up in terms of, at TFES, we talk a lot about essential skills, and you touched upon leadership, agility, and teamwork. As you're working in a team, obviously, it's not just what you're doing, but how does it impact others? And how can others come in and chime in, and obviously the fail fast and get back on track. I think those are things that, as an organization, when we're working with students, we're really emphasizing so they can practice and be good at it. But
yeah, exactly. Like we've come up with some good ideas, and we don't know how those are going to work. We do a lot of things that are like jam sessions, where we'll take a very small team and put them in a room and see what we can come up with, or talk about a problem area that we keep dealing with and how to solve that. And those are some of the best times, is just kind of getting together and focusing on a very small group and what we kind of put together. And an example was, we got together with a group of interns, and the interns basically drove the project. But we had these classic games at Microsoft, like Solitaire and Minesweeper, and some of these old games, and they're hugely popular with certain audiences. But the more modern day players aren't as big into those old games. And so we brainstormed, hey, how can we make this more fun for kind of this new generation of players? And they came up with some amazing ideas on, hey, let's take this typically one player game, and let's make it 250 players, and you can invite anybody in, and maybe you have a giant board full of mines, and each person takes their own section and tries to disarm the mines without setting them off and things like that. So yeah, you get a lot of good ideas from that. And sometimes we come up with game ideas that don't work, and that's all right. Like, we still learn things from that, maybe trying to tackle a new game engine or implement a new feature. And so you got to take your winnings away from it as well, even if it doesn't blow into a full-fledged product or something like that. The meat of this company, what we started as is, translation services. And with games, that's a lot of localization work as well. So making sure the text, has the right flavor and the right translation, for different audiences. I can remember an old game. I love the game to death, Panzer Dragoon, but they translated the English language. The original language was in Japanese. And when they translated it, whoever translated it tried to make it a South Park joke. And the audience might have understood that if you are a South Park watcher, but on the other hand, if you aren't, it doesn't make sense. And it really wasn't true to what the original translation of the game, text was. So we don't want to do things like that. And that wasn't done at this company. So yeah, we want to meet local colloquialisms. We want to flag content that might not exist in target cultures or is regionally problematic. I know we had some problems with some games in the past where I worked, where either there was chanting from the Quran in music, or we might have showed historical sites or things in our artwork. You can't do stuff like that. So you need to make sure you're checking globally and that you can meet that stuff. Testing is a great area to break into the industry on. A lot of people do it this way. That's how I broke into the industry. Started as a $10 an hour tester, testing Nintendo 64 games, thought it was the best job in the world. It is a great career path if you can make it work and become technical. So these are the different things. Like for functional testing, you analyze a product, you do an area breakdown, you may train people, you may learn new skills yourself. You're going to set up the test environments. Every day we usually flash our machines to take a new build to make sure the old build doesn't mess up things on your development kit or your PC. We're always updating documentation. We're creating a test plan. What are we going to test in this game? We write individual test cases so that we can prove that we ran this test and it passed or failed. We're writing bugs. You got to have great communication skills when you write bugs, because it's kind of like a game of telephone. You're writing up what you see. You got to have detailed steps that a developer can follow to reproduce the bug that you see. You got to tell them what you expected to see and what you actually saw, and just make things crystal clear. A lot of times we'll attach screenshots or video, or in most cases we want to get kind of if it's a crash or something like that, we want to get a call stack and let them know where the code went awry, and give them as much information so they can fix it quickly and effectively. Because if you don't, then it's going to come back again. The developer is going to say, I don't have enough information in this, or hey, I fixed it, it works on my machine, and then you get it back and it doesn't work. So you want to reduce that. Localization testing is sometimes very similar to functional questioning, but generally we go in and we localize the content in the game, and then it comes back. And localizing into different languages can have its own set of problems. So you can see text clipping and line breaks. So, your text might not be getting cut off at the right place, or you have to allow for languages like German, which generally take like 1.5 times the amount of text that something in English might take. So you want to look at the text boxes and things once the game is localized and make sure everything fits correctly. You can have character and font encoding issues. The UI design might not be as understandable, and you might need to make some tweaks. Times, dates, measurements, here in the United States, we generally do month, day, year, but it's not always that way in other countries. So you got to make sure you're showing the data that they expect to see. Yep. Age ratings, like I talked about, this is a new area we're getting into, so it can be a pain point for developers, but every age ratings bureau from around the world, you've got PEGI in the United Kingdom and a lot of Europe, you've got USK in Germany, you've got CERO in Japan, you've got the ESRB in North America, and there's probably a dozen, maybe 24 other age ratings. So if you want your game to be global and to reach as wide an audience as possible, these are things that you need to take care of. You got to get a rating, and that it involves dealing with kind of a ratings service or bureau, letting them know what the game is about, calling out, extreme violence or bad language, or, if there's nudity or sexuality in the game, you have to let them know all the worst parts of your game. And sometimes you have to show videos of that. Sometimes you have to give them a build and tell them how to get to that content. And then once they've evaluated the game, sometimes it's a group of people who understand the software. Other times it's just people who watch the videos and they aren't associated with games. But it's kind of like the Motion Picture Association that kind of gives ratings to movies. So console compliance is another one. Every game system, like console or even PC games, they have their own set of criteria before you can release on their console. So just to give an example of what something like this may be, is like, if your controller comes disconnected in the past, like the game kept running and you were like, and you would run and have to replug in your controller. And usually you were dead by the time that happened, or you had lost whatever scenario you were doing. Now, if the controller becomes unplugged or it loses connection to the console, the game has to automatically pause the game and give you a message on the screen saying, hey, your controller is disconnected, please reconnect it. And so those types of things make it easier on the end user. And, we want to do those things for sure. And if you don't have those things done when you're doing compliance, they will kick it back to you. And it's a back and forth between the console maker or the PC maker, and they will tell you what you need to fix, but it can drag things out for months if you don't take care of things properly. So player support's another one. That's where we're people run into bugs, issues. This isn't working on my machine, areas like that. So they'll reach out to player support. Player support will gather the information. If they have a workaround or they're just not doing something right, they'll get back to them. If it's truly a bad bug that we didn't find before it released, then that information will get relayed to the development team and hopefully plotted into a sprint so we can get that fixed for players. One of the games that we previous released had a driver issue that was, an issue with mostly machines in China, and we didn't have enough of those machines on our team to catch that issue. And so once we released, we started getting reports of this specific hardware not being able to render the game properly, and we had to go back and acquire some devices and narrow that down a bit further. Community management, this might be getting players excited about what's coming. Hey, the game's going into beta. We want to get people to sign up and play. We want to get your feedback. Hey, the game's coming out for full release. We're excited about it. Let's do some, coverage on what the game entails. Maybe talk to the developers. Even after you release, it's about, hey, here's an upcoming patch we're going to do. We're going to fix these areas of the game. We've got new content coming out in this area, et cetera, et cetera. So. And then audio, we talked a bit about audio, and we can do end-to-end audio production, translating, make sure we're hiring voice actors in the appropriate countries or with the appropriate language experience where they understand that the need for that. We can make voiceover and sound effects and music, compose music for games. So definitely cool. We can go in and do all the post-production stuff as well. So the area that I kind of went into was QA. So I'm just going to kind of cover some of the different areas that we hire for. A test associate's entry-level tester or has very little experience. They'll test the game. They'll get direction from a test lead. They'll run test cases. They'll log bugs. Software test engineer is a little more technical. They're going to own areas of the game. Maybe you own save load. Maybe you own a certain amount of levels. They're going to write test cases to prove that the game is truly tested and that we think of all the different scenarios. Software development engineer and test. This is a more coding type position. You're still a tester. You're still going to find bugs, but you might write tools and automation, generally code that doesn't ship with the game, but helps you be more efficient in your testing, and can even do some automated testing. We would set up our boxes every night when we went home to randomly play games, and you'd be amazed. You find a lot of crashes or edge cases. And then a test lead generally manage the testers. They talk directly with the development team. They break the game into areas and assign those out to the STs. And then a test manager manages the test lead. So if you have enough projects, you'd have a test manager or a test director. And just to kind of give an example of what you might do in a day as a tester, I always start my day by catching up on email. I'll attend a daily stand-up for my project and talk about what we're working on, what's coming up. You'll write and adjust test cases. You might do reviews to make sure, somebody who's been doing this longer than you doesn't find something that you didn't think of. And it's a very open and collaborative opinion, process. It's not like ooh, I found this area you didn't cover. So we want to, highlight the successes of others. Spend time testing your areas, logging bugs. You will also, once the bugs are fixed, you'll go in and make sure they're fixed properly and that there's no knockoff effects. Generally, for every 3 bugs you fix, one of them will have side effects. And so you want to find those side effects. If they're minimal, you might not fix those for the first release, but if not, if they're still major or they lead to a worse problem, you want to get those fixed. And then sometimes we'll organize, play sessions or other things for the entire team to play. And then before you go home, sometimes you'll set up nightly automation. If you take anything away from this talk and you want to break into the game industry, the next 2 slides I think are the most important. These are the things I've learned in my 24 years in the game industry. You got to have a passion for gaming. I get a lot of people who come in and I'm like, hey, what are your favorite games? What are your favorite games of all time? What have you been playing recently? And they're like, oh, I'm not a gamer, or oh, I don't have the time. You're instantly off my list if you're not passionate about games. So be excited, be able to talk about games you've played, what your favorites are, why they're your favorites. Sometimes you'll be asked, okay, now that you've told me all the things that are your favorite about this game, tell me something you didn't like. So you got to be, open to discussing the problems with games. Most games aren't perfect. And then they might ask you what you would do to fix that problem. Whenever you have started a career and you have game industry experience, always listed on your resume. I know this sounds silly, but you want to call out what work you've done to show the experience, and you want to list the games that you've worked on if you can. Sometimes you're under an NDA or a non-disclosure agreement and you can't talk about the games you've worked on, or they haven't come out for release yet. But once they have, you saw the list that I have, it's far easier to go into a job interview and say, I worked on Halo, Gears of War, Banjo-Kazooie, Conker's Bad Fur Day. They instantly know that I've worked on titles that they care about. Unless the request is insane, try and say yes as often as possible. Don't think you are too good for any work. I worked with a developer that asked for some pretty challenging things that kind of stretched what I was responsible for. But every time you do some of those, you gain more and more respect with that developer, and they want to work with you more and more. There were some crazy requests that I got too, like one developer wanted me to move my entire staff forward 3 hours every day. And I had to say, I can't do that. People have families. Some people take their kids to school. I can ask some people on our team to do this, but I can't ask everybody. Volunteer for the jobs nobody else wants. When I was early in my career, everybody got frustrated when they had to work on a Japanese product because there was a language barrier. They often used different tools. Communication was rougher. And so it was an area nobody wanted to do. And quite honestly, I love Japanese games, and it was an area that I was very interested in. But I was like, hey, if nobody else wants to do this, I'm only a software test engineer right now, but I want to be a test lead. Put me in charge of one of these projects, give me a mentor to make sure I'm not going too far off in the weeds or doing things wrong. And so I was very quickly able to come on, learn how Japanese developer works, and there might be a few differences or preferences on every developer and how they want to work. And very quickly we came up with, the best way to do things that worked for that developer and worked for us. And so after doing that for a couple of years, I got promoted up the ranks pretty quickly. So become a subject matter expert or go-to person on certain areas. When Xbox first came out, the very first version, the OG Xbox back in 2001, the hardware team was coming up with their certification cases, the things you have to do to be compliant on the console and release. No, everybody was scared of that and making sure the game met that. And I was like, put me in charge of it. I'll learn it. I know it's tough and complex and technical, but make me the first person to do this work. And honestly, I got a team of 2 other people to help out, and we learned this stuff and we became the go-to people for this. So whenever there were questions, people came to us. We became indispensable to the different console projects. Add an about me section to your resume. List your interests, list things that you do that are charitable or fun. I have gotten jobs because of something I put in this paragraph at the end of my resume. The first job I got at Microsoft when I came on as a contractor, I interviewed with 3 people, came to the last guy, and the last guy was like, hey, listen, I'll be honest with you, we already hired for this position. And I was like, oh, why did you waste my time? And he was like, but there's one more guy, he's going to be hiring for a project, I'll have you talk to him. And so I went in and spent 30 minutes with this guy, and he had Metallica posters and Megadeth posters and just different heavy metal bands on his wall. So when he came in, I was like, oh, you're a heavy metal fan, I love heavy metal too. Our entire 30-minute conversation was around heavy metal, and he was like, I like you, you're going to get the job. And so, you know, you never know what's going to help you get a foot in the door. So don't be afraid to put that stuff on your resume. You don't want to have an 8-page resume with, you know, a lot of stuff, but put, you know, a paragraph's worth. Once you start working, keep a performance folder in your email, track your achievements. When you do something good, put an email in there to remind yourself, because generally at the end of the year, they're going to ask you what you did for the year. And then it's just simply clicking that folder, looking through what you've done, and reminding your boss, hey, here are all the great things I've done this year to be a high performer. Get your foot in the door by any means. Don't, like I said, don't think you're too good for something. I have a guy who is ahead of an entire division in Xbox now. He started out as a software development engineer in test, and he was a developer. And early on, he was like, man, I want to be making the games. I don't want to be doing tools. But he did that for a year or two. And he was like, wow, now I see how testers are kind of the low man on the totem pole. I understand the work they have to do. And now I understand that I need to be nice to my testers and what they're looking for. And then he was able to go into game experience. And now he's an AAA developer. So if you hit a wall in your career, don't be afraid to look for places to go, internally and externally. If you're at a big company, great. Maybe there's another division or another game or something that you could go to and have a great impact there. I left Microsoft for a few years because I had a boss that told me, you're a senior producer and you're never going to be more than a senior producer. And I was like, nope, I know I can do more. And so I had to leave a big company like Microsoft, went to a smaller company, and I was a big fish in a small pond there. I taught them how to do a lot of things. And I grew into an executive producer, and then I led all the production, testing, and development teams for that company. So it doesn't hurt to look around. Creatives, have a portfolio to show art that you've done that's 100% yours. Like, it's so quick and easy to let artists evaluate you and to see all the great work you've done. If you have time, read books on software game development, the history of the industry. It's cool to learn about all the different console generations. Find a good coach or mentor, listen to them, especially if they've been in the industry longer than you or are higher level than you. And don't just be focused on yourself. You need to help others succeed. I can't stress this one enough. There have been times where there are other teams working on things that relate to what I'm working on, but I'm not, my success is not tied directly to that. But if I can help a team integrate their work into my own and help them get their job done easier, I will. And that has come back. I have gotten so many bonuses and other things for making sure others have succeeded. And then if a contract ends or you're laid off, get back out there and find something new. Don't beat yourself up. It happens in this industry. Use your contacts that you build on LinkedIn or other areas and get back in the fight. And in every position in my career, when I've left one and gone to the other, it always ends up being something better. So even if it doesn't seem like you're taking something better, it can grow into that. And try not to complain. If you need to complain, complain upwards to your boss. Don't complain to everybody in the testing bay or the bay where you're working. That'll never get you anywhere. We're running low on time, so I'm going to skip my entertainment industry stories. And we'll go to Q&A.
Christopher, this has been so rich, but I got to ask, you got to share at least one of those stories.
Share one. Okay. There was a time when we were working on Xbox 360 games for launch, and the game I was working on was with Rare, and it was called Cameo Elements of Power. And we were working on these giant Macintosh G5 computers, and the game was very early in development. It had actually been on GameCube, and then we ported it to the original Xbox, and it was about 85% done. And then we had to learn this all new hardware and port it again to what was going to become Xbox 360. And I was told by my boss's boss's boss, Bill Gates wants a demo, and our game is the farthest along, so we're going to demo for Bill Gates. And so we had to cart all this hardware over and get set up. And Bill Gates had kind of a handler at that time. And he was like, hey, Bill's busy right now. He'll come in the room in the next 5 or 10 minutes. Just set up your area. Like, don't talk to him. I'm going to cover some business with him. And then we'll come over and you can demo the game for him. And so this boss's boss of mine was like, this build is so fragile. Whatever you do, don't give him the controller. We don't want him playing directly. You know where the game is good. You know where it's solid. You know where it crashes. Just hold on to the controller. If he asks about it, I'll run interference and change the direction. And so Bill Gates came in and they talked business, and we were trying not to look at them too much and set everything up. I mean, you've got this giant, legend coming in, and eventually he had time and he came over. And so I was talking to him about, hey, here's the game. You play as this fairy princess in this kingdom, and these trolls are coming and kind of destroying things. And, here's an example of how you can fly around the landscape and talk to different characters. And this skip level boss goes, Chris, give the controller to Bill. And I was like, what? We had practiced this entire time that this is exactly what we wouldn't do. And so I stepped out of the way, and I glared at him, but then I stepped out of the way and he took the controller, and he was flying the character around and going close to doors that I knew would crash the game. And I was just like, hear me, baby, hold together. Let's keep this thing looking good. And he flew around for a while and asked a few questions. And then after that, he was done and handed the controller back, and I just breathed a huge sigh of relief, and we had to tear everything down and get out of there real quick. But it was a fun experience being able to say you demoed for Bill Gates. It was just kind of stressful getting ready for it. So
wow, talk about a presentation for the big boss, huh?
Yep, for sure.
Well, this has been awesome, Christopher. I really appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, you shared about 12 different career paths within gaming, and there's so many opportunities out there. And for those students who are really into gaming, you've got to share that story. I know, parents. I remember my parents would tell me, "Well, would you stop playing games? You're wasting your time." And now we really have to adapt, right? Because they could be the gamers of the future who are creating games or testing or any of the functions that you mentioned, and we might be forcing people to go in a different path. But if this is what they're passionate for, there's some great opportunities. And I just want to recap some of the things that you mentioned. Obviously, the mentoring aspect of it, obviously, as you're moving into these positions, for our students, this is a great opportunity to go find someone who works in the gaming industry and ask them to share their pathway, or ask them to mentor you unofficially, if you want, on how to break into some of this, even though you share great tips on how to break into this area. But there's many people like Christopher who are out there, and based on your personality, it sounds like great people to look up to.
For sure. Yeah. And exactly like you said, when I was young, I remember playing a video game console, and we got a new game for Christmas, and I played it, ignored all the people who came over for Christmas from family, played it till like 2 a.m. in the morning. My dad was like, turn that thing off. You've been on it all day. You didn't even say hi to people. And I went to bed, and the music was ringing in my ears, and it hurt quite a bit. And my dad was like, you're never going to make money in this industry. He worked at Boeing his whole career on airplanes. And when my dad retired about 10 years ago, at his retirement party, he held up his last check, and he was like, do you ever think you're going to make this much in your industry? And I said, Dad, I'm already making double that. So
that is an awesome story. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. Well, thank you. And we would love to have you back and do another session with us. You share some great content here, and maybe we can do this in person next time.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, awesome. And wishing you well with this, with the new job. Obviously, this is one thing Christopher didn't share. He's been at TransPerfect for 3 months, but, has done quite a lot already. So keep up the good work.
Will do. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.